In this video, I'd like to talk about the process of multiplying fractions. And how you actually perform this operation is fairly straightforward. You can just multiply straight across in the numerators, so you get 2 times 1. And in the denominators, you'll do the same thing. You'll just go straight across, multiplying 3 times 2, so that our final answer would be 2 divided by 6, which we can further simplify since 2 and 6 are each divisible by 2. So we can divide them each by 2. And essentially, the reason we can do this is that we're ultimately just dividing by 1, since 2 over 2 is 1. And you can divide anything or multiply anything by 1, and it will not change the answer. So our final answer here, when we simplify this, will be 1/3. So the question you should have is why? Why did we just multiply straight across? When we add fractions, you might recall that we need to find a common denominator. So why do we not need that when we're multiplying fractions? And probably the best way to answer that question is to draw a picture. And before we do that, we do want to think about essentially what this question is asking in English. And a lot of times when you see the multiplication operation, you can replace it in your mind with the word of. So it's essentially like we want to take 2/3 of 1/2. So if we start with 1/2, we want 2/3 of it. So let's do that. Let me first draw a picture of the fraction 1/2, and then we can take 2/3 of it. And to draw a picture of the fraction 1/2, I'm using the rectangle model here. So the entire rectangle we can consider to be one whole, and our denominator tells us essentially how many equal pieces we want to cut it into, and our numerator just tells us how many of those pieces we have. So in our case, we have one of them, and so this shape right here is essentially the fraction 1/2. So if we want to take 2/3 of this, again, our denominator tells us how many equally spaced pieces we should cut our figure into, and our numerator tells us how many we should actually have. So what I'm going to do here is for each of these half-sized blocks is I'm going to cut them into 3 equal pieces. So in total we'll have 6 pieces. And then out of the half that we actually do have, we want to take 2 of those 3 pieces. So we've got 1, 2, 3 pieces there, and we just want 2 of them. So we'll take this one and this one. So now, hopefully visually this makes sense why in the end when we had 1/2 and we took 2/3 of it, that we ended up with 2 out of 6 pieces. And then we were able to simplify it further and call this 1/3. But you can clearly see visually that we ended up with 2 out of these 6 equally sized blocks. And again, we could reduce this because each set of 2 would be equal in size. So 1 and 2 are the same size as 3 and 4 and as 5 and 6. So it's almost like we have 3 different sections here, and then we have just one of these 3 sections, which is another way of thinking about why this simplifies to 1/3. So let's look at a separate example problem now, but we'll go through the same process. Let's say we want to take 1/4 of, let's say, 2/5. And you could really start by drawing either fraction first, but until you fully understand this process of drawing and cutting up your shape, I would recommend doing this before just memorizing that you multiply straight across. So let's start with the fraction 2/5. So let me draw a quick sketch of that. And each of these 5 pieces are supposed to be the same size. And then we actually want 2 of them. So let's say we have this one here and this one here. So if we want to take 1/4 of this fraction 2/5, we'll now need to cut up each of these 5 boxes into 4 equally sized pieces. And then out of those pieces that we actually have, these 2 in white, we'll only want 1 of those 4 boxes. So let me first cut everything up, each of these 5 equally spaced boxes, into 4 equally spaced pieces. And now that our shape has been cut up even further, so we started with these 5 equally spaced yellow blocks, And then each of those was cut up into 4 equally spaced pieces. So we can count them out, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And what you'll find is that there are 20 of them. Essentially 5 blocks, each with 4 pieces. 5 times 4 is 20. And once we've split these up into 4 pieces each for each of the 5 blocks, then now we go to our numerator. So out of the 2 pieces that we had when we originally cut it up into 5, we then further cut these up into 4, and we only want to take 1 of them. So for instance, in this first white box, when we cut it into 4, we just want 1 of them. And for the second white box, when we cut it into 4, we again just want 1 of them. So in total, we ended up with 2 of these boxes out of the total of 20 that we cut it into. And since each of these is divisible by 2, we can simplify this fraction down to 1/10. And you can see that if we just multiply straight across, 1 times 2 is 2 for our numerator, and then 4 times 5 is 20 for our denominator, and again, we can simplify that. So hopefully this process makes sense, but we will go through a couple more examples in the next video.